Hello, Lisa here. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a VR to a very old tag, but it's one I've been wanting to do for a long time, and I'm finally sitting down to make this video because I finally understand how I want to approach it. I've been wanting to do it for a long time, but it is the 10 Pieces of My Soul tag. This was created by Kelly Fitzgerald of A Truth and Story, or just Truth and Story. I just added an extra word to her channel name. But I love Kelly's channel. I love her approach to cards and divination. I really respect her opinions, and I really enjoyed this tag when it first came out. I just didn't know quite what my pieces were. And I feel like in the time since that video first came out, the pieces for me have really come together in a way where I want to share them. And I've tweaked this a bit for myself. The idea to me of 10 Pieces of My Soul makes sense. It's kind of addressing the idea of a soul deck, but instead of looking at just like a singular deck that like sort of ticks all of your boxes, it's more like looking at if there's these different parts of me or these different parts of my soul. And I realized as I was starting to take notes on how I wanted to approach it, even back then, I realized that what I wanted to do was look at specifically different aspects of my personal work and the way that I've bonded with different decks because they fit so beautifully into that part of my personal practice or my personal work. And so I've named each of these 10 pieces of my soul, and I'm going to share with you the decks that fit into these spaces in my life, in my practice, in my soul. My number one soul deck, and this piece of my soul I'm just going to call my primary piece of my soul, the center of my soul, the spirit of my soul. And that deck for me is my Mons Tarot, and any version of my Mons Tarot, although I always use this first edition as like the one that I refer to when I talk about my soul deck, because this was the first one, and this was the one that I originally bonded with, and I love this deck. This is not a surprise. You guys hear about this deck all the time. I love it. I adore it. I adore everything about it, and I have no other words other than to say that when I first got this deck, it just felt like it was looking at me, as if the deck creator had been like, I'd like to make a deck for Lisa Papez. That's who I want to make a deck for. So I'm just going to make this deck, and it's going to be Lisa Papez's deck, which is incredibly ridiculous to say out loud. But it's how this deck makes me feel. It makes me feel as if it was made for me. In spite of the fact that it's not like somebody said, oh, Lisa likes unicorns, so this unicorn deck is for Lisa. Because that would be what people would think, right? Or it's a Hello Kitty deck, or it's a whatever my aesthetic is. People be like, that would be it. I think the reason that this speaks to me the way that it does, though, is because it's monsters, because it was unexpected, because these creatures, I didn't have any preconceived ideas about them. Like with unicorns, I have a lot of preconceived ideas. With Hello Kitty or any of my other things that I love, My Little Pony, whatever it is, I have all these preconceived ideas of who they are and what they're like. This felt like an introduction to a whole new species of characters who had my best interest at heart. That's what this feels like. And working with this deck feels like I'm visiting another world. And I've talked about that a lot, but more than that, I feel like it's a world where anyone can belong. It's a world where everybody has value despite what they look like. It just feels like it puts like humanity on an even playing field, which is such a rare thing to see and to have a way to express or to experience in a deck. This one feels like it does it. It does it to me. It just does. And so I feel very seen. I feel very welcomed by this deck, and it just feels like home. And so this is very much the spirit of my soul, the Mons Tarot. It will probably always be the one that when somebody says, oh, hey, what's your soul deck? It's going to be like, oh, it's the Mons Tarot. Like, that's going to be the one. And it is special, but it isn't the only thing. And I don't use it as often as I talk about it, if that makes any sense. When I really need to feel home, when I really need to feel seen, when I'm going through a tough time, or when I need to be reminded of who I am, this is a deck I'll often go to, but it's situational, much like all of my decks. And it's special because of the way that it effortlessly speaks to me, but that doesn't mean it's the deck that I use the most often, which I think is a really interesting distinction to make in general. So the next piece of my soul I want to speak to is my inner child. And if you want to play along, feel free to try to guess. But my inner child deck is the Playful Heart Tarot by Kitten Chops. Now, I love this deck, partly because I feel like it is the most accurate in representing my inner child, or anybody's inner child, maybe. I don't know. I shouldn't project, but I feel like it'd be so good for anybody. It's beautifully produced. When I first saw this deck, I actually noped it. I was like, I don't want that. I don't want that deck. The art style is playful and childlike and kind of messy, and in an intentional way, but it is messy. And that messiness is typically something that I don't enjoy in artwork, in decks. But in this particular deck, it's exactly what it's supposed to be. It's the exact art style you need, I feel like, to connect to that part of your inner child that is looser, that is less afraid of judgment, less afraid of making mistakes. And at least that's how I see my ideal inner child, as somebody who's full of hope and optimism and can see the world honestly without second guessing themselves, but also who experiences their emotions fully. And one of the things I find that this deck does very, very, very well is it allows emotion, the expression of emotion, to come through in the artwork. And that means that when you have a difficult card, like the Devil, I feel like the emotions and the experience of the Devil card is right here. When you have sadness or anger or frustration or impulsiveness or what have you, or worry, I feel like it comes through in this artwork. And so it's a very emotionally expressive deck, and I feel like that's perfect for inner child work. So this deck, to me, really represents that part of my soul, that inner child part of my soul. It lets me speak directly to my inner child without any barriers in the way. Because some decks that I feel like are very childlike or youthful, they don't show the same rawness of human emotion and experience that this one does. And it's just so well done. I adore it. And this is the first edition Playful Heart Tarot. And this, it's so funny. I did not know. This was a deck that I had decided I wasn't going to buy. And I ran into Zara Kitten Chops at the Northwest Tarot Symposium, and she had gifted me a copy to share with you guys. And it ended up being a deck that became really beloved in my collection. So that is the Playful Heart Tarot by Zara Kitten Chops. The next piece of my soul is my shadow self, the shadowy part of my soul. And this one won't be a surprise, I don't think, for many of you, but this is my Deviant Moon Tarot. The Deviant Moon is very much my soul, my dark soul deck, my shadow soul deck. It is the only one I ever want to reach for when I'm doing shadow work when it comes to tarot. It just so perfectly points out the stuff I'd rather not look at. It so readily shares with me the uncomfortable and helps me to look past the optimism that is my default setting. Sometimes when I'm dealing with difficult situations, I really strive to only see the best possible motivations or outcome, and that can really get me into trouble, both with how I deal with other people from the perspective of only seeing the positive in myself to how I deal with other people in the sense that I'm only seeing the positive in them. And I think that's a quality in myself I really like, but it sometimes, like I said, gets me into a place where I'm suffering as a result of my own naivete. And I feel like a deck like this is so helpful for me for balance and for making sure that I'm seeing the truth of situations, seeing deeper, seeing past that shiny exterior to the sort of raw messiness of life underneath. And this deck helps me do that in a way that I just genuinely really appreciate. So this would represent my shadow self, or the shadow part of my soul. And I have 2 copies of it. I also have the Paradoxical, which I don't like nearly as well as the original, but is kind of got a really cool coloration to it. So it's fun. I'm glad I have it, but like I still prefer the original. So the next piece of my soul, kind of jumping off of the shadow self, is my healing self, the healing part of my soul, the part that needs to really look at things and address them, but heal and nurture and move forward. Like the shadow stuff, the shadow part of my soul, I feel like is the part of myself, or the deck that I use for that part, that work, is the deck that helps me kind of poke at things and kind of get into discomfort. The next deck also helps me get into discomfort, but it specifically helps me heal from that discomfort, and that is the Reclaim Oracle by Marion Costentin. What can I say that I haven't already said about this deck? I love it so much. It's incredibly effective at what it does. It's very unique. It has these keywords like boredom, and then these illustrations that so perfectly illustrate the concept of boredom. It's very emotion-based, resentment, faith. It's very balanced between difficult experiences and emotion and traumas and positive, blame with finger pointing, humiliation, the way that all the eyes, this is another deck that when I got it, I was like, oh, it's speaking to me specifically. And to some degree, all of the decks in this category feel that way. They all feel, to a degree, the way the Mons Tarot makes me feel, as if the creator made it for me. Again, it's really hard to describe that feeling, other than to say, this one specifically speaks my speak. And I suppose you could take this list of decks that I'm sharing with you and apply them to the other VR that's been going around. if I could only keep 10, because I've got 10 decks here. And these are all, because each one of them feel like a soul deck to me in their own special way, because of the area that they address, you could definitely slot this into that VR as well. But it's really, I just see these as pieces of me. Each one speaks to a different part of me in a specific way. And the Reclaim Oracle, it just knocked my socks off. I just don't know how else to explain it. I have typically used it for myself, but I have also used it for others. It's very intense, but it holds your hand the whole way in a way that I think is really powerful. This works really well as well with the Gentle Tarot, which I feel like if I were to pick a tarot deck for this category, it would be the Gentle Tarot. But I wanted, this one just barely beats it out. You know what I mean? This one, because it has the words right on it that I'm dealing with, it makes it one of the easiest decks to specifically do this kind of work with. And I love that about it. So that is the Reclaim Oracle by Marion Costentin as the healing part of my soul, my healing soul. So I want to talk next about my social soul. So this is the part of me that really is dealing with other people. This is the part of me that interacts with others, that has to work and play well with other human beings. It's the part of myself that actually does need to interact. As much as I'm an introvert, this next deck is really speaks directly to my soul when it comes to interactions between people, relationships between people in a general way. Like if there was a deck to represent sort of the global population and the way that I kind of interact with the world, I feel like this is the one, and it's my This Might Hurt Tarot. In a lot of ways, this prompt has been really great for me because it's made me realize that while I default to saying the Mons Tarot is my soul deck, I could just as easily have said that about any of the decks I've spoken about, including this one. And in fact, if I were to pick a #1 deck, like an all-arounder, one that I could use for any type of reading, and if I could only have one, I would probably pick this one over Mons Tarot. If for no other reason that the Mons Tarot feels like it's speaking directly to me, this one does as well, but it feels like it does that for everybody that I've ever used it for. So I feel like I could read for myself with this deck, but I could also read for others with this deck. And I'm incredibly tempted to buy a second copy. And I've never intentionally bought a backup copy of any deck, but mine is actually showing quite a bit of wear. I've got some cards with damage on them now. I use it so much. It is it is definitely my most used tarot deck in my collection. It gets a lot of play in client readings. It is one of my favorites to use if I'm just going to read for anybody and I don't know them. This is a great deck to use because I feel like there's an openness and an acceptance to this deck that meets everybody where they are. There's a lot of diversity in ways that I appreciate seeing diversity in my decks. It feels modern, it feels approachable and relatable. And all of those things I think make it an excellent reading deck and makes it more possible for me to feel comfortable pulling it out for just about anybody, which makes it really unique. And so when I think of this as my social deck, it's because this to me represents the type of people that I interact with in my real life or have interacted with. It feels really palpable and personable. It feels like real life in a way that a lot of my other decks don't. And in fact, some of the things that I like most about my other decks is that they don't feel like real life. But this one does. This one feels like real life. And I love that about it. And it's been a long time favorite. I would love to get another copy someday in the pearl holographic edging, which is the white holographic. This dark holographic is gorgeous, but the hollow effect is completely worn off of mine at this point. I can't find a rainbow. And you can always tell my most used decks by this line right here, because this line of wear down the center of the cards at the edges, at the top and the bottom, that's from doing my riffle shuffle, from running my thumbs along the cards like so. And the bottoms will always show it more than the top will because of the way that I shuffle. Anyways, this is definitely my most used deck, and it represents my social soul. So the next piece of my soul that's so important to me is my connection to the sea and to the ocean specifically. And there's a lot of layers to that. There's a lot of reasons that's important to me. But my ocean soul, the part of me that wants to feel connected to the ocean, that deck, of course, is my Healing Waves Tarot. I have this in a wrap bag because it doesn't actually hang up. It lives on my ocean altar, and that is where I work with this deck. But I like to have a bag so that if I ever need to put it away, I can. It doesn't get put away. It stays out all the time. But I've put it away, I guess, so I could show you the box and stuff. Oh, I had it zoomed in. That's okay. We'll live. In any case, this is the Healing Waves Tarot. This was a small run deck from a producer in Thailand, from an artist in Taiwan called Nawan Jun Hasiri, I think is how you pronounce her name. And it was a deck that wasn't going to get funded. It turned into this big personal project of mine to try to help get it funded. And this is the final version that we got when it was finally produced. I had gotten a few cards as sample cards so that I could share the deck and hopefully help get it funded. The energy of this deck is really what does it for me. Will I say that this is my favorite way to depict ocean related or ocean themed art ever? No, like this card for me is not one of my favorites, artistically speaking. But the energy of this deck is so spectacularly ocean feeling. It's really hard to describe. And I think part of that is because the artist used ocean water to wet her watercolor paints. And she painted this whole deck using this ocean, like collected ocean water that she had collected personally. And then she used that to dampen her watercolor pigments and paint these paintings. And I do actually have a original painting by this creator. She sent it to me as a gift. And it is one of my prized possessions. I need to actually get it properly framed, like matted and framed, but it is of the King of Pentacles. And I love this. And the fact that this was painted with ocean water, it's really quite special. And I'm so pleased to own it. And I'm so pleased to have this deck and to be able to work with this deck. It's really a special part of me. And so I do keep it on my ocean altar on a tray, and I'll pull a card multiple days in a week to get a message. And it just helps me connect with the ocean. And I love that about this deck. I just think it's really special. It is really hard to find, but keep your eyes out on eBay and trade groups because people do occasionally trade or sell this deck. But the creator said when she first made it, she wasn't going to do a second edition. She was just going to do the one print run, and that was it. And that's what she's done. I suspect this was much more for her a personal art project than really something meant to dive her deep into the tarot world. But I think she did a beautiful job with it. I'm so grateful to have it, and I love it. So that is my ocean soul. The next part of my soul I want to talk about is my unicorn soul. And I mean that exactly the way it sounds. I do feel like there's a part of me that is unicorn. I don't know how else to say it. So I'm just going to say it like that and let you guys make up your own minds about what I mean by it. But my Last Unicorn Tarot is definitely the one. Now, I am a hardcore Last Unicorn fan. There's a lot of things about this story and about this movie that mean a lot to me. But this was also my first ever Kickstarter deck. And I waited a long time for it. I think it came out like 2.5, 3 years after the Kickstarter launched. But it was well worth the wait. Like, it came in this beautiful, hard, hand-carved box with a scene from the movie. Just beautiful padded bottom here for the cards. This like faux leather hardbound journal with a built-in ribbon bookmark. A card signed by Peter S. Beagle in it. And we even had alternate lovers cards. There was a whole debacle about that lovers card. But anyways, beautiful production value, beautiful deck. And this story, this movie, is part of why unicorns are so special to me. There's a lot of messaging in this story that I just personally relate to, that feels really connecting. And it's my fandom. Like, this is my fandom. If I was to say there's one thing that I can be a super fan about, it's this movie. And so seeing the art depicted so true to the movie, and this was an officially licensed product, so it was, it was done properly. So I don't have any feelings, any misgivings about working with it. It was just done by hardcore fans of the show, or rather of the movie. You can tell. I had the wonderful opportunity to go to a screening once of the film. Peter S. Beagle went on tour and showed screenings of the movie in, like, I want to say it was like 2010-ish, 2012-ish maybe. And we got to go. There was one that happened about 45 minutes from where we live, and we were able to go. It was incredible. I got, this had nothing to do with that. This deck hadn't come out yet, but I got a print signed by Peter S. Beagle. I also got the graphic novel of The Last Unicorn signed by Peter S. Beagle, who is the author of the book, of the Last Unicorn book. But anyway, this deck speaks right to my unicorn, the part of me that feels like it's unicorn in me. I don't know how else to say it. And it's funny because as I flip through these cards, there's not pictures of unicorns like throughout the deck on every single card, but I know this story so well. I love working with this deck. And I've actually ended up using it quite impromptu at once for some mediumship style readings, and it went very, very well. And I think it's partly because this connects me to a part of myself that can do that. I don't know how else to describe it, but it was really powerful. Anyways, also look at the bling. It's pretty, right? It's pretty. So yeah, that is my unicorn soul, the last unicorn tarot. The next category is my witchy soul, or the part of my soul that I associate with like connection to earth-based religion in general. The part of me that practiced Wicca, the part of me that considers herself a witch, that part of me, which is a huge part of my personal identity. I wanted to pick a deck that, because I have so many decks that kind of feel a little bit witchy to me, but I wanted to pick the one that feels like it talks to all of those parts of my journey. And the one that does that the best is the Witch's Wisdom Tarot. Now, there's a few reasons for this. This deck was created by Phyllis Curott and Daniel, I can't remember nope, that's wrong. I forget the artist's name, I apologize. But Phyllis Curott was one of my big draws for this deck because she was an author that was really important in my journey. And her book, Book of Shadows, which is written, it's kind of like a memoir, but it reads like a novel, was a book that I regularly recommended to family and friends when I had been practicing Wicca and I was looking for something that would help them understand what it was that was important to me about it. And so this deck, having her writing in it and having her approach to the concept, to witchcraft and to walking a witch's path was so meaningful to me from a symbolic standpoint. More than that, though, I really connected to what she did with the major arcana in this deck, which is to reverse it. So that you begin, instead of as this bright-eyed, shiny, new, naive fool, you're actually kind of coming at life with all of this baggage you're carrying. In this case, the World card is the beginning of the major arcana, and the city's on fire behind them. And to me, this is so telling at this point in my life of where I'm at. Like, I've been through so much. I have so much life behind me. And that comes with all this baggage. And so the journey of the major arcana and the Witch's Wisdom is actually kind of about finding your way back to that place where you can be open to new experience, where you can come back to that place of the fool. And you really feel that journey in the way that this is done. The guidebook is poetically, beautifully, powerfully written, and it does a really good job of taking you on that journey. And there's so much about this deck that feels like earth-based religion, but it feels very non-dogmatic. It doesn't feel so Wicca. It feels very open in its approach to the concept of being a witch, of walking a witch's path. And it really helps connect to that part of my soul. And when it comes to like a deck that I want to seriously dip into for witchy work, this is the one that really just does it for me. It helps that I really sat with the guidebook. I read the entire thing cover to cover as I went through every single card and really just took it in. And I think that really helped to bond with it, to get to know it, to connect to it. I do feel like this is a deck that requires that kind of an effort because it does. Like, I wouldn't necessarily pull the Four of Water and be like, oh, I know what this is saying. And I also feel like it does go its own way a little bit. Like, when you read the messages, you can make a case for the Rider-Waite-Smith connection for every single card. But I also feel like there's so much more. And so you could also treat this as a standalone deck in your collection. Like, work with it, I guess, maybe like an oracle, or work with it as a tool. And that's kind of how it feels for me. It doesn't feel like the kind of thing I would pull out and necessarily use to read for other people. It feels like something I like to use to sit with for myself, to really connect to this part of my practice. And it does that so, so well. So my Witchy Soul deck is the Witch's Wisdom Tarot. These next two are the newest in my world. And one of them, actually the next one is the most new to me of all of these, and so new, but it connected to me so, so, so strongly. This is the deck that I feel like represents my celestial soul. So the part of me that feels like a little bit of a starseed, the part of me that feels like I'm part of the universe, that I want to connect to something greater, that part of me, that part of my soul is best represented and connected to the Dream Vision Tarot. I did not expect to connect with this deck the way that I did. I love it so much. It's been a really, really powerful deck in my practice, and I don't even have the words. You can definitely watch my walkthrough and really feel the way that I was connecting with it as I did that first walkthrough. And then I worked with it, and the connection just got deeper and deeper. I feel like when I'm working with this deck, I'm working with something otherworldly, with something that is connected to the stars, is connected somehow to multi-dimensional, multi-universal wisdom. It feels like I have a red line phone connecting me to a race of beings that has more knowledge, than humans do. Like it feels very woo, but in the best way. And I express a lot of this in my walkthrough and in other videos where I've talked about this deck recently. But when it comes to thinking of a deck that represents that celestial part of me, that's that part of me that wants to connect to this kind of energy, that wants to connect to that deeper wisdom, this is definitely that deck for me. It's a fast favorite. I also find it really easy to read intuitively. In fact, I don't think there's there's no guidebook. There's a digital that you can look up, and I've not felt the need or the desire to do that. It works. I wish I knew how else to describe it, but it is spectacular and I love it. And it definitely represents that celestial part of me, the Dream Vision Tarot. And the last category is my dreaming soul. This is the part of me that there's a part of like the dream world and the way the dream world informs your life and the way that the dream world has wisdom for you. This next deck for me represents the world of dreams, which is so funny because obviously the prior deck was called the Dream Vision Tarot, but it felt very celestial. This is the Tarot of Mystical Moments by Katrin Wellstein. And it's so funny because there was another deck that to me had kind of a similar vibe called, I think it was called the Dream Keepers Tarot. But this is the deck that I feel like represents the wisdom of dreams. I don't know how else to describe it. I love reading with this deck. I think it's absolutely spectacular. I wish it wasn't glossy. I have some production value things, but it is so stunning. I love the size of the cards. I love the artwork. I feel like it really speaks to me. Intuitively, it speaks to me, but I hope you can see in the artwork just why I feel like this is such a dreamy deck. It feels like we're literally peeking into the dream world. There's these layers of sort of like realism and surrealism that is really cool. And I'm using those terms not as like somebody who knows what they actually mean, like from an artistic standpoint, but somebody who just knows that something is realistic versus it's surrealistic. So that's what I mean by that, in case that creates confusion. Love this Eight of Cups so much. From the moment I got this deck, it's lived on my favorites rack because I feel like I can pull it out and get so much out of it. And as somebody who leans heavily into intuition to do readings, this one just, oh man, it just does it for me. It just gives me so much to work with intuitively. And yet the Oracle deck by this same creator got nothing from it. I got nothing from it. It was just as beautiful. Same exact art style. Got nothing from it. But this one, this is my dreaming soul. The Tarot of Mystical Moments. And that, my friends, is the 10 pieces of my soul. Again, this was a VR to Kelly over at The Truth and Story. I think her original video came out some time ago. Thank you so much for hanging out with me while I went through these. This has been on my to film list for a long time. I'm glad I finally got a chance to do it. I genuinely appreciate you sitting here with me in this space and sharing all of this with me. Whenever you visit my videos, it means a lot. So thank you so much. If you did enjoy the video or you found value in it, click the like button. Subscribe if you're new here and you want to see more videos just like this. Don't forget to click the little notification bell so you're notified of future videos and live streams. And as always, thank you so, so much, and may your magic always shine from the inside out. Bye, guys.